What's up, Internet? You're tuned in episode 122 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Split Screen Games' weekly gaming podcast all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. We are here to talk about ports and AAA gaming on Steam Deck. Like we promised we would before Valve released malware on Steam last week, and we had to derail the topic. So this one's been a long time coming. But before we jump into that, I wanted to bring something to the audience's attention if you hadn't noticed it, or if you had noticed it, maybe you could feel validated, because we got a regular listener, active member of the Discord, Team Linux, wrote in and said, "Pete, you seem to be confused about what episode number you guys are on in the last few shows you've done. The number that is 119, Bloodborne on Steam Deck, Max disrupted the flow, and then you said it was 118. Then episode 120 you said was 119, and then finally episode 121 you also said was 119. The only reason I even caught it was that I had to reinstall Audio Bookshelf on my true NAS server and wanted to make sure I downloaded the last couple I missed. I thought it downloaded the wrong episodes." This is so funny, and I think it's so funny that, like, I doubt it has anything to do with Max and the Handbrake, but the fact that that happened to like set it off makes it so much funnier to me.
I feel like we need to do like something with episode 119 now, some kind of like either merch, or we want to do a special like a special like secondary podcast that's just called episode 119, and every single episode is episode 119.
I think we should just make a t-shirt that just says Steam Deck Podcast episode 119. Like, and that's just in big,
find
like,
out which one it is.
Like, if you've ever seen one of the I'm not a wressling guy, but it's like the Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's like Austin 316. We just do it in like bold, like sans serif font. Steam Deck Podcast episode 119.
You know, I don't know why I thought you were a wrestling guy. I swear we've spoken about it before, and like we spoke about like Logan Paul getting into like the Pokemon cards thing and like having that around his neck at wrestling and stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I grew up with a lot of people that were wrestling fans, right? And like I have friends that are wrestling guys, so it's like I've always been on the periphery. It's like I have a it's like you know, I don't speak the language, but I took a class in high school, you know? It's like I could get by. I could find out where the bathroom is, but you know, no expert.
I remember it being WWF. And
then they had to change it because of the World Wildlife Federation. They sued them.
Yeah. And then I remember the video games. Like I really loved some of those, like the WWF Super Slam or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, it was like No Mercy, Here Comes the Pain, Just Bring It.
See, we had one on Dreamcast, and me and my brother would like slam each other. We thought it was the most hilarious thing that you'd like leave the ring and you just go pick up some chairs and start whacking them over the other person. It was great. Yeah. It was bizarre.
Yeah, sports video games used to be fun, even if you didn't like the sport. We've moved away from that a little bit, but you know, this is a great time for you to talk about some of those games, Steve, if you want to see them on Steam Deck, because we're going to talk about ports we want to see come to PC and what the future of AAA gaming looks on Steam Deck this week, now that I'm done embarrassing myself. So we wanted to talk about this because a couple weeks back, there was the PlayStation State of Play, and there was talk about the PC port for last year's exclusive on PS5, Stellar Blade. So that's coming out in June, and obviously that got quite a bit of attention because there was definitely a lot of talk about the game when it came out. There's been some talk about, you know, like the developer itself is excited to see it come to PC and see if it'll connect with a even bigger audience there. But the bit that is important for our purposes today is that there was a earnings report where Shift Up was talking about the PC release, and they specifically mentioned targeting the Steam Deck as part of their strategy for releasing the game on PC. So this is what they had to say. Question: what are the expected results of the PC version and why? Answer: in the AAA game market, PC devices have a higher market share than consoles, so we expect the performance of the PC version to exceed that of the console version. We are particularly observing trends such as the significant expansion of the single-player action game market in the Asian gaming industry. We have identified and analyzed both successful and underperforming cases of console exclusives released on PC, and we are preparing to release the game in a way that ensures continued success in the PC market. This will include optimization, enhancing user convenience, adding supplementary content, and tailored marketing strategies unique to Shift Up. In particular, we plan to optimize the game to ensure smooth gameplay even in UMPC, which they then parenthetical Steam Deck environments.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like, I haven't heard the term Ultra Mobile PC in a very long time, UMPC.
Yeah, you called that out and you were like, what the? Like, that's such an archaic, way to describe a handheld PC.
Yeah, it was from like the mid 2000s, and it was around the era of Windows Vista, and I think Microsoft was just trying to find new idioms and ways to sell Windows, and one of them was this like Project Origami that then became these ultra mobile PCs. There was the Samsung Q1. You remember the Sony Vaio UX that slid up and it had the little keyboard underneath? But those things like died a death in 2010-ish. Was like really the last one that came out. And I think with Windows 8 onwards, they were very much like, oh, let's look at tablets instead. Like, that's the future is tablets, not these ultra mobile PCs. But thinking about it, we kind of have had a shift back to it with the Steam Deck and with these other handhelds. We'll talk a little bit probably next week about the Lenovo Legion Go S, because that's just had some previews. But I hadn't even really thought about it. This is not a term I've thought about in about 15 years.
It's very funny. Yeah, it's just like, it feels like a little, I mean, like, good on them for targeting it, but yeah, it does feel like a little bit like like old man yells at cloud. Like, it's like, oh, okay. Not quite the word I would have used for it, but fair enough. We know what you mean.
Yeah. What did you think about Stellar Blade potentially outperforming the PS5 version on PC, and that's their expectations here?
I mean, I think that makes sense, right? Like, I don't think that's a controversial expectation, just because of like what PC is as a platform, right? Like, it's like, the console version, if it's an exclusive game, right? It's like, of course it's going to underperform comparatively, right? Just because, like, there are how many PlayStation 5s in the wild? It's like 30.
It's 75 million.
Okay, I was about to say 30. I'm way off there. Okay, 75. Yeah. So I mean, even a 50% attachment rate, right? It's not that many people versus the millions and millions and millions of players that are on Steam, right? Just because access to a lot more devices. Not to mention, I think that they make a good point that I could see this genre of game resonating with PC gamers anyway, which I think, is the other kind of wrinkle there. Like, obviously there are games that, do more of their business on console than PC, but I think, like, when you're talking about, a game in like a niche genre that was exclusive to one platform, yeah, like, I'm not surprised that it didn't necessarily meet expectations, and that, like, on PC it has an opportunity to connect with a wider audience, Like, Days Gone enjoyed that, right? Like, it kind of was, like, released with a bit of a thud or a whimper on PlayStation, and when it came to PC later, it got a whole new audience, and it was kind of reappraised by a new community. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see, right? Like, I don't really remember what the general, like, temperature check was on Stellar Blade. Like, I remember all the lead up to it in the pre-release material, and then I remember, like, the kind of, like, faux controversy of people being like, nobody likes it because it's, sexy or whatever, and it's like, I don't know that any of that mattered at all. So
Well,
like,
people said that.
yeah,
That's
wasn't
usually
wasn't this the
it's
one?
usually the opposite, that people are like, "Oh, I'll get this game. It's got
Well,
a
no, that's what I
sexy
mean,
lady
though. Like, it was like an
protagonist."
artificial controversy that people were like, people are outraged that this game is sexy. And it's like, I don't think anybody is outraged that this game is sexy. Like, I didn't hear one person complain about it. It was one of those things. It was like very like manufactured kind of like, defensive outrage or whatever.
Yeah, it got 81% on Metacritic.
Yeah, it's like, that's good. So, I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, so to answer your question, I would suspect that their prediction is probably correct. It'll probably do a lot better on PC if it's a solid game, which if it's an 81, it's probably pretty good, right?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's the case for all video games going forwards? Like, if the market share, even for PS5, if they're saying the PC marketplace is like way bigger, I'm thinking about Xbox's side, right? Those games must be selling way more on PC than they ever do on Xbox, especially when you factor in Game Pass. But do you think, say, PlayStation's, I know this was technically it's like a published PlayStation game, but I'm not going to consider it first party. It's probably second party or third party, right? Stellar Blade is
Right.
published by Sony, but it's not really a Sony game. It's a third party studio that they're publishing. Do you think Sony's PlayStation Studios games perform better on PC than on PlayStation, or do you think they probably sell equally or a little bit more on PlayStation?
I think it depends on the game you're talking about.
Say like God of War.
So, because like, my gut reaction is still probably yes, just for the same reason that I said before, right? There's just more players, right? Like, there's more rigs that can access Steam than there are PlayStations, right?
And they've always got a longer tail, those games, as well on PC.
Yeah,
people
that's
wait for sales
and
like,
yeah, right, yeah. Which, I mean, that is also changing, right? Like, we've seen that attitude, I think, kind of jump over to console gaming more and more because, like, shit's expensive and people are playing older games for longer or getting into old games that are on sale that end up back in the zeitgeist, especially because games like age better now too, right? Like, especially if you're playing on like Xbox, for example, right? Like, you played with Prey, right? Like 6 years later or something. You're like, this looks like a brand new game.
I was playing that on Steam Deck, which was great because I downloaded that from the Epic Games Store as a free game.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Used Heroic and downloaded that.
So either way, right? Like, point made.
But that's the beauty of PC as well. Like, those games, as they kind of sit, they're only going to get better because the technology is going to enable you to push the frame rate or push the graphics, push whatever.
So like, I think on some level that, I think as a general rule, probably makes sense. The idea that like games will sell better on PC because there's more, potential users and like the way that the audience engages and re-engages with games, right? Like, they continue to sell. But
you also have the market to sell a game over and over again, which we've seen on multiple occasions, the remasters, the remakes.
Right. And that was what I was going to say is I think when you brought up God of War, that is one I would assume probably sold better on console as well because it was available on PlayStation 4. So it's like, that had such a bigger, right? Think about when that game came out, right? That's 2018. That's several years into the life cycle of one of the best-selling consoles of all time. And it's, a game people are probably still buying, right? Because when the sequel came out, a bunch of people probably bought it on console. So I would imagine that a game like that probably sells better on console, but I wouldn't be surprised if to find out that Days Gone had maybe sold more copies on PC.
I would, not be shocked by that. But say something like,
or even Spider-Man 2.
I was going to say Spider-Man 2, which this week got
it's only
verified.
Right. And obviously, that had a bit of a rocky launch on deck, but that's a game I could see selling more copies on PC again, just because of like when it came out on the PlayStation 5. That there's not as many of them available, right? So like, I mean, it's still right. So say it was 2 years ago now. So it's like probably in the neighborhood of like 50 million instead of 70 or whatever. But like, I'm sure that game had a great attachment rate, but it's just like, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that a game that sold gangbusters on PlayStation 5 and was a Game of the Year contender and is one of the most popular, characters in the Western canon or whatever, that it's like, yeah, I'm sure there were a bunch of people on PC that were like, oh, bet that's a day one purchase, right? Because, like, I think that's part of the benefit that these games enjoy, too, is that when they do come out on console first,
Everyone already knows about
they already
it,
know that it's great, right? So if it's a good game, you're like, yeah, great, awesome. I like the first one, I'm in, I liked Miles Morales, I'm in. So yeah, I think it probably depends on the title, but like Ratchet and Clank is a game I wouldn't be surprised to learn sold more on console.
That was a launch window title, and I would imagine the attachment rate was pretty low. And coming to PC, there's more people that you kind of open that up to.
The only reason I said I wouldn't be surprised to find it had sold more on console is just because it didn't. I don't feel like it had that same splash that some of the other games do on Steam. But again, that could just be me not hearing people talk about it, and it's quietly selling millions and millions of copies, right? To a point that this is a drum you've been banging for years now. It's like there's too many sales to be made on PC to ignore the impact it has on these games' overall software sales. And that's why they're doing it, right? Like, yeah, I mean, they have to see that potential is that, like, yeah, in a great scenario, you might be able to literally, like, double the amount of sales, right? Like, even if it doesn't, quote unquote, sell better on that other platform, if it sells the same amount, that's huge. That's it's like you're literally doubling the amount you were able to move. So yeah,
I mean, it looks like your theory is probably correct with Ratchet and Clank. SteamDB is estimating between 380 to 600,000 copies sold on PC, with God of War Ragnarok between, it looks like about 700,000 to 2.5 million copies.
Okay,
PC.
so they're definitely selling better on console then.
I don't know how many Ragnaroks sold.
Definitely more than 2 million.
But yeah, definitely more than 2 million, I would say.
I think it was quite a bit. I don't have the number in front of me, but I'll pull it up.
But then you look at something like Helldivers 2, for example, where it sold potentially 55 million copies, according to Steam Spy on Steam. If you go with one of the other estimates, it's probably around 20 million, 15 to 20 million copies. I'd imagine that's probably sold more on PC than it has on PlayStation.
Which game was that?
Helldivers 2.
Yeah, probably. I think for multiplayer games, that's like probably a foregone conclusion that they just will generally sell better. So real quick, it looks like God of War Ragnarok sold 11 million copies in its first 3 months on the market, and
it's sold way more on console than it has on PC.
Yeah.
I think it probably is then just a case of it depends on the game. Helldivers 2 multiplayer works great on PC, makes sense that it's there. Something probably
type
like
of game that
Stellar
PC
Blade.
gamers gravitate towards.
Yeah, and also Stellar Blade, probably very popular in the Asian market, going to be very popular in Korea. It's a South Korean studio. It's not available on PC yet. Even there, I'd imagine that's going to be very popular on PC.
We'll see, though. I mean, I would have expected those numbers to be a bit higher, so maybe not. But the metrics for success for that game are probably quite a bit lower too. I imagine its production is not, it doesn't cost the same that it does to make like a God of War. So
yeah, what do you think about these games potentially running well on Steam Deck? Stellar Blade's obviously targeting the Steam Deck. They've spoken about that in their earnings report. We saw this week Spider-Man 2 get Steam Deck verified, and potentially is a little bit more stable. It can seemingly hit around 30 frames per second with default settings, but it's by no means solid and like what I would expect really from a game of this caliber to run on a Steam Deck. But I feel like that's probably going to be the norm moving forwards. Like, we're getting to the point where these games are potentially moving out of the reach of being able to play on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, I think we've kind of already hit that point for my money. I think it's been a minute since and there probably is one that I'm not thinking of, so please correct me if what I'm saying is out of turn, dear listener. But I can't remember the last big AAA game that just ran on Steam Deck without caveats, right? Like
Mm.
there have been, some in recent memory that like, oh yeah, like with tweaking it works, with after a patch it worked, after some community workaround you can run it at, so like just sub 30 or like I can think of those examples, but I feel like we've kind of been in that wave for a bit of just like most of these games are just a little too powerful, just a
I mean,
little outside the reach
Indiana
of stable.
Jones seems to be pretty playable on deck. It says it's unsupported, but according to Proton DB, it's gold. It will run, but I don't know. I've not played that myself, but I think again that might require some tweaking. I think you're probably right. I think we're at a point where it's just like these games are being built for the consoles being the lowest common denominator, and those consoles are significantly more powerful than the Steam Deck currently. Maybe that shifts and changes when the Switch 2 comes out and the Switch 2 becomes the lowest common denominator. I don't know if that's going to be more powerful or less powerful than the Steam Deck. All signs point to it potentially being on par, if not more powerful than the Steam Deck. I guess we'll have to find out. I'm pretty nervous that we're at a point where new releases going forwards aren't really going to be playable on the Steam Deck. And
I think so.
for me, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm not really using it and playing most of these big AAA games there anyway. I've got the consoles for that. I'm playing games like Balatro and other indie games and old games and revisiting titles and emulating and doing, streaming to it. Streaming from PC or from console is it's a great way of playing on the go.
Yeah, that's generally my preferred experience, because when it comes to those kinds of games, like, I want a bigger screen, right? Like generally, it's not totally like there's like I could definitely see myself replaying Spider-Man or something like that on my Steam Deck.
But that's a replay. The
Right,
first time around, do you
exactly.
want to be playing that on a handheld? I mean, I did play the majority of Indiana Jones on the Steam Deck streamed from Xbox Cloud because I was at my parents'. But that, again, once I got back home and I was able to play it on my big OLED TV in the living room, that was a much nicer experience because it's a very cinematic game.
Yeah, it's like I think you want the option, right, with stuff like that, because like that was a thing, like I did with both like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where it's like if I'm at home, yeah, I'd rather be playing it on the TV on the big screen, but like if I'm on a plane or something, I'm not gonna not play it for 6 hours. I'm not. So yeah, I think to your point, like if it's a replay, if it's a game that you're spending 100 hours in and you can dip in, dip out, and choose what tasks you're doing or whatever, fair play. But yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to play Indiana Jones on Steam Deck, for example. Like that was, like you said, a very cinematic title. I'd rather experience that on a larger screen.
Yeah, I do like the swapping back and forth though. Like you're right with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. That was how I basically played it. I'm going to do a big battle. I'm going into the dungeons. I'm doing that on the TV. But when I'm exploring and I'm out and about, open world games are really suited for handhelds.
Yeah, if you just want to like chip away at tasks, right? Then it's like great, like that's perfect.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I definitely think you know I think we're fast approaching the point where if you want to play those kinds of games on Steam Deck, it's gonna have to be with quite a few caveats, until we get a hardware update.
Yeah, I think there's probably some games coming out this year that are going to be fine. Civ 7.
Sure.
I would imagine the Elden Ring game coming up, Night Rain, that's probably going to run fine. So there are some titles still to come, but yeah, I would kind of start bringing in your expectations that this is going to be where you're going to play every single game if that's what you've been enjoying currently.
Yeah, because even some games that are not the most like intensive, like don't have the best performance. Like I thought about picking up Metaphor ReFantazio on
Mm.
deck, and it like had enough asterisks that I was like, all right, maybe not. Like I watched the Digital Foundry breakdown, I think it was, and it was like, I don't want to constantly be dealing with frame drops and whatnot, right? And that's obviously not like a super graphically intensive game or anything like that.
I'm surprised that doesn't run as
It might run better now, right? This was
yeah,
like
it could be like a few patches deep. And that, but again, that's annoying that you've got to wait. And that always is the case, even if you're playing on a big rig on PC. It's like, oh, well, we'll release the game. And essentially, the people that are playing day one, you're the beta
yeah.
testers, and you're going to figure it out for us. And
Yeah, like that's what
we're
just
deal with
happened with
some issues.
Spider-Man, right? Like it's like more and more people are like, okay, it's running now, it's better now, it's yeah, but it's like, but yeah, you spent $60 or whatever it was to be the beta tester, and like that's frustrating.
Which I'm
right?
fine doing if it says early access on there,
Yeah,
and I know, and I know that that's going to happen. But when it's got the PlayStation Studios logo and it's got ported by Nixies on there, I'm expecting a decent experience.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's it's a frustratingly common experience for PC gamers for a game that you were waiting for to come and then not run properly. And I think with the Steam Deck, like it's usually because it's trying to play something that's like a little outside, like it's hitting a little above its weight class, whereas
Mm.
like I think most of the time the unfortunate reality is that like it's hard to optimize games on PC because the environments are so different, right? Like you and I could have rigs that are 90% the same, but I have a different graphics card and therefore it's a little
Yeah, or
different,
you've got a slightly faster stick of RAM,
Right,
or
exactly.
a slightly more higher clocked CPU.
So it's like there's just an infinitesimal number of variables.
Yeah, but that's obviously not the case with the Steam Deck, and I think I like the fact that there is one SKU there, and seemingly developers are using that as right. We should set this as the baseline, and we want the game to run on this, and if it runs on this, we can scale up from there, and that seems to be what is happening with Stellar Blade, and we've seen that happen with other games too. That there are specific games with like dedicated Steam Deck modes, like Cyberpunk, for example. But I kind of feel like as we move into the Unreal Engine 5, Nanite, Lumen era of video game making, I kind of feel like that's just a little bit too much to run on hardware that's, 4 years old at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. So, let's get into some of the community responses here because we did throw out the question about like what are AAA games you'd love to see come to Steam Deck? What are the ones that you're concerned might not make the jump? That kind of stuff. And we got some fun answers. So, unfortunately, Max was not able to join us again today, but he wrote in with some of his thoughts. Max said, I'd like to throw some suggestions I would have said for the PC ports anyway. Other than Bloodborne, I would want the God of War OG trilogy, Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian. Basically, all of the Blue Point remasters. So that's like the Uncharted collection,
Oh
Demon
yeah, the
Souls.
Uncharted collection.
The Uncharted collection is like definitely, it's so like there's Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy, but you can't play 1, 2, and 3. It's
Yeah.
insane. Get them over
But
there.
Iron Galaxy's been busy. Have you seen what they've been working on?
Yeah, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, baby. We talked about it on the Daily Checkpoint. Let's go. What a time to be alive, people. Oh my God. Okay. So I mean there's one.
Yeah.
Every Tony Hawk game port them.
Did they come to PC? Did the last one?
Yeah,
come to PC?
actually, Iron Galaxy ported 1 and 2 to PC before
That makes
this.
sense,
Yeah.
And that's definitely coming to PC then. I mean, this is going to be a Microsoft outing now, so they're going to want that on PC day and date. I'd imagine this will be day and date on PlayStation as well as Xbox.
I don't know if it'll be day and date on PC. I wouldn't be surprised if it's
Really?
yeah. Just that happens all the time.
I mean, they're flogging PC Game Pass. They're going to
Yeah, I mean,
on there for people.
Not that I think they wouldn't want it to be there. It's more.
It could have been that this was in the pipeline long before the acquisition, right? Like, or before.
Yeah, and it's like that's a fairly standard practice, right? To release the game on consoles first and then work on a PC version because, I mean, for the exact reason we just pointed out, it's like it's easier to optimize a bigger game like that, right? Like if it's an indie title, if there's certain titles where it's like it doesn't matter, right? Like of course this will be day and date on PC because they're all going to run.
It's probably coming to PC first anyway for an indie title because we don't have the cash for the 3 dev kits that we need.
Exactly.
And this is going to fund it.
Right. But yeah, with something like this where it's like it's a bigger, like higher intensity game, like it's fairly common for it to come out on one platform first and then either they work on the PC version or another studio comes in and ports it to PC like Iron Galaxy, right? I hope it's day and date, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a couple months later or
Mhm.
whatever, right? Like that's fairly common practice.
Yeah. I kind of feel like we're gonna see Rockstar do the same if
Right,
GTA
like
6 does
GTA is
land
not going
this
to be.
year.
I don't think it's going to be day and date on PC. I don't. Maybe it will.
I don't know if they want the the online thing there for day and day because they bought what was it, Red 5 or something, or 5M. They bought 5M, um the team who do like multiplayer mods for GTA 5 online. So maybe that they're doing something there and they're doing something with that team. I don't know, but whether the story mode comes day and date, who knows?
Yeah, it could be. Right? Like in this day and age with how long the game's been in development, like it could absolutely be something where they're like, "Oh no, we want to make sure it's their day and date because that's a huge part of our audience," right? But no, I think you're probably right. Like I think they probably will bring it to PC later because consoles it's just easier, right? Like there's less variables, you have more control. It's a walled garden, right? Like it's you're
Has the marketplace shifted though? Like, if say the Stellar Blade team are like, right, PC is a bigger market for us, Rockstar might have looked at their figures and gone, right, 50-60% of players on GTA Online are coming from PC. They're using mods, they're doing this, they're doing
yeah.
that. That's kind of where we want to be. We want to make sure that we're capitalizing on that.
I still don't know that I think that changes anything because I think that like even if even if you're looking at your numbers and you're like, okay, like PC is where more people are playing GTA Online right now, right? That might be true. Um, but over the course of Grand Theft Auto Five's lifetime, right?
They
Like,
were probably playing on 360 back then,
yeah, they were. That's where it released, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's been a cross gen release on 3 different console generations, all of which sold it as a full price boxed copy. To get into
They did split out GTA Online with
eventually,
the PS5
yeah,
port. Yeah,
after it
that
had
definitely
become
got split out.
a fucking $1 trillion seller, they did. But yeah, so I think that just if you're asking me to bet, I still think that makes the most sense because if you put it on PC 6 months later, a year later, that's not going to influence. It's not going to impact it negatively, right? Like it never hurts a game to come to PC second. At least not that I can think of, right? Like generally it's the game comes out on console, you have, the initial wave of people check it out, it gets buzz, you get through all of the like again, right? Like if you're trying to get a launch of what is GTA Online 2, the launch of GTA Online was so messy, right? And like if it had been on Xbox and PlayStation and PC, it would have been even more messy, right? So it makes sense to do it in a more controlled environment with less variables, with like everybody on Xbox is using the same hardware or one of two SKUs, I guess. Everybody on
Mm.
PlayStation is using the same hardware. It's easier to create, you know. And again, there's less tools for cheating on console, right? So it's like there are just less things you need to control because it is simpler and, that's the whole thing, right? Is like consoles are simple and straightforward. PCs are, more diverse and more unique and more able to, you know, have those really, really varying situations that all need to be kind of like you need to be able to put somebody who's playing on a potato and somebody who's playing on a super high end rig in the same, you know, in the same room and make it work. And I imagine that takes a bit more lifting.
Man, the anti cheat little seed you've planted there for GTA 6 Online is a scary one as well, because I could easily see that being a justification for this never coming to Steam OS, let alone Steam Deck. Like, say I'm running Steam OS on an ROG Ally or a Lenovo Legion or whatever it might be, or the Steam Deck 2 is running on Linux, and they could easily just be like, well, our anti-cheat doesn't work there and we're not putting the effort in, and you're never going to be able to play it online, which would be really sad.
possible. And obviously, we've seen that in the past, like stuff like Destiny, and
Yeah,
there are
Destiny still doesn't work.
plenty
Yeah.
of games that you can't play on deck. GTA 5 online is playable on deck, though, isn't it?
It used to be, but I
Oh,
think
right. There was the update, right?
yeah, I think it got disabled.
Yeah.
But I think it might have got turned back on. No, it's lost its Steam Deck
Mm,
verification because it's rolled out BattlEye anti-cheat,
there
and
you
BattlEye
go.
doesn't work.
So yeah, I mean, I think those are the risks you run, right? But
Mm.
we'll see. I think I don't know. I think it depends on like how much this market continues to grow. Because if there continues to be, more of these devices that are running on Steam OS, and it is like a bigger and bigger part of the market, and like you can activate, uh, in the same way that like when the Nintendo Switch was like new and fresh, and it was like if you put a game out on it, it'll sell really well. It's like I think there is a little bit of that with Steam when a game is like, oh, it targets Steam Deck. It's like Steam Deck people will play it, and it'll be on like that top list, and like that probably does artificially drive players to the game. So maybe at some point we hit a tipping point where they believe it is worth it to come up with a Linux solution.
I think the solution is make it a Web3 online game that pays me to play, and then I'll download it on Steam. No problem. If you're unaware what I'm talking about, go listen to last week's episode.
Yeah, Steve's talking about last week where Valve accidentally released malware on Steam. So go and listen to last week's show.
Doc in the Discord was just like the game you're describing when I said I was pitching you that game, right? I said, it should be like a tycoon game where it pays you to earn. Apparently, it's Cookie Clicker, and I was like, yeah, but like theme it as Web3 malware, and then I'm on board.
Theme it. All right, this next comment comes from Leopard Eye, who wrote in and said, "Monster Hunter Wilds, even though it isn't out yet, the demo wouldn't even work on my deck. Oh, that's a bummer."
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that demos often aren't very optimized. We saw that with the Elden Ring demos; they were kind of pretty bad. The network tests, so it may work. They may put the effort in, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I think that's an Unreal Engine 5 game. Actually, it might be RE Engine. But yeah,
We did have Wakahula responded to that and said the demo was a really old build, had ray tracing enabled by default, and you couldn't turn it off. Benchmark runs better, but still the deck is aging extremely fast. So that's an interesting one too, is that like I guess with some demos, there's like default settings and stuff like that you might be able to,
they
play
want to make it
around with.
look the best, like they want to showcase it, but they're putting it out. They're busy working on the game, and this is a vertical slice that they have been told to get ready and ship, and they don't necessarily want to do it, but it's coming from the executives to sell the game. So that's why you end up with situations like that. But yeah, interesting to it's a very good point. Like the deck is aging extremely fast. I feel like we're at a point now where game development is rapidly accelerating because we're like halfway through maybe more than halfway through the PS5's life cycle at this point. And it's usually only really the last 2 or 3 years that you see the fruits of everyone's labor on what that generation is really, really capable of doing. And I think we're finally getting to that point.
Yeah, because I mean, what? PlayStation and Series X came out in 2020, right?
2020, yeah.
Yeah, so we're 5 years in. So yeah, I mean, we're probably
2028 was the rumor that
right.
the PS6 was and the next Xbox was targeting. We could see another Xbox sooner than that. We don't know, but 2028 is when I think people are expecting the PS6. So now I would expect to start seeing, some of the more meaty games. I'd imagine Wolverine, for example, on the PS5 is going to be a very, very sexy looking game.
I gotta say though, I think there's a very real chance that these devices might go longer than we think, because if you remember, right, which don't get me wrong, 8 years is already a long time.
I mean, the Switch managed it,
right? But when you think of the generation that bucked the original trend of how long console generations were. It was the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation, right? That went for 8 years. And that happened because of, the recession that we were going through at the time, right? It was the post-housing market crash. And, there was a lot of conversation during that time. I remember reading the interviews with developers who were talking about, like, they were at a point where they were ready for new hardware. They were ready for the next step, but gamers weren't, and they didn't have the money for new hardware. They didn't have the money for stuff that was, cutting edge and pushing the envelope. And there wasn't a desire for new hardware. And I think we're definitely seeing that right now. Like, I mean, obviously with the Switch 2, there's hunger for that. I think if you polled PlayStation 5
there was no
owners,
hunger for the PS5 Pro.
No.
And everyone's response to that was, well, why do I need it? You've not given me an example. You've not shown me why I need it. With the PS4 Pro, it was obvious. I can hit 60 FPS and we're getting 4K with checkerboard rendering, and like this is what people wanted, and it added HDR support for the first time.
And I think it's worth pointing out that, like, the PlayStation 5 Pro, like, does have considerable benchmark improvements. It's like I think there are people, like Digital Foundry did a whole breakdown about how much better a game like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth looks on that than the PlayStation 5 proper, right? Like, I think we, like, the collective, gamers online talking about games, we love to go and claim Digital Foundry as, like, the end-all be-all when it comes to these kinds of technological comparisons. They themselves were pointing out how the PS5 Pro was an attractive upgrade, and to your point, people are not interested in it though in the way they were in the
no because
I just don't think
it's diminishing returns. It's diminishing returns. People look at it and go, oh well, it looks good enough,
right?
And I don't need to spend another $650 to upgrade. I just don't.
And I think that speaks to where we're at right now, right? That, like, there is just broadly diminishing returns on trying to chase, graphical, higher graphical fidelity, right? Like, there is a point where it's we're never going to have the same jump we had in previous generations, and I think that's the expectation still. And that's already unrealistic. But then I think you do get into that question of, like, all right, so, like, if it is diminishing returns, if we are in a universe where, like, what we have is good enough and people aren't itching for more, they're not itching for, and even developers, right? Like, to your point, have we even really seen people start to unlock the full power of these devices? Like, not really. Like, they're just getting there now.
Yeah.
So it's like
the only complaints we've seen is the Series S should not exist.
Right. And when you think about, and so maybe Xbox has to deal with that problem, but I also
they've got a lot of problems.
I also don't even know that Xbox is going to put out more hardware at this point. I mean, everybody's been talking about, they already announced another console, blah, blah, blah. They could cancel it. They sold 3 million.
I didn't know that they have announced another console.
No, they've talked about how they were developing another one. That doesn't mean they're going to put it out.
But also, like, that could be we're developing a reference piece of hardware and we're going to allow other people to make it for us. In the same way that is potentially what the Steam Deck has become.
Point being, I think the idea that this console generation could go longer than 8 years is not crazy. Because if what you're saying is true, right, and developers are only just now really starting to unlock the true potential of these devices, think about how much longer it takes to make a AAA game at all, right? Like,
to some extent, I agree with you, but I do think in, say, 2 years' time, these consoles are going to look
dated,
very aged and very dated.
Is that
I think the large part of that is the machine learning side of things, and I think PSSR goes some way to doing it with the machine learning neural chip, but I don't think it goes far enough. You look at what NVIDIA is doing on the PC side and what they're able to achieve.
No doubt. I'm totally with you in terms of, like, I think that's the next step. That seems to me to be the next big technological leap, is going to be consoles and PCs that can take advantage of this machine learning to improve output for less power, right? Like, I think you're totally right about that. I guess my question is that technology mature enough that, because like to your point, are these consoles going to be showing their age in 2 years, or are we still going to be making games that are targeting, you know what I mean? Like
Maybe,
if the
but like,
games
do
are
you want?
targeting their benchmarks, they won't look dated. They'll look like, to
Hmm.
your point, the way that like Last of Us Part 2 did not look dated. That looked cutting edge, right? And it was pushing the envelope of what that console was capable of. And if the games that are going to be doing that on the back half of this generation started development a few years into the console cycle, because it's like, again, right? Like, think about like some of the big marquee PlayStation 5 games were cross-released on PS4, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but they weren't meant to be. They only did that because of, economics, and they
but
weren't
they
able
but
to
they
get enough
played.
PS5s out. Yeah, they did. Yeah,
So
but I think they'll want to repeat that strategy moving forwards. That
probably, yeah.
potentially they do release a console in 2028, but people aren't buying it until 2030, and they're doing that cross-gen for a couple of years, and then they kind of move on.
And I guess that's my question. Is I think even if you do that, does the longer development cycle, the fact that you can get, because again, like, what are the games that are coming out that are so cutting edge that they don't run on console? Like,
People were saying they would point to like Final Fantasy, right? And the fact that
yeah.
it does run so much better on PS5 Pro and on PC. And I think
But
there
you
are going to be games like that.
but you also just made the point that people are like, yeah, but it's good enough.
Yeah, it is. But I think if that's happening now, and that's a game that was in development in the
Yeah.
previous generation, like, what is going to happen in 2 years' time? Are these going to be games with, like, does 30 FPS become the norm again? And I think people
Yeah,
had
I think it probably does. But I
it
think
was
that,
like a nice luxury at the beginning of the generation. It's
yeah.
like, oh, I'm playing Halo multiplayer in 120 frames per second, and it
Right.
feels super fucking smooth and it's great. And then now we've just gone back into,
Yeah.
oh, 30 FPS is the standard again.
And I mean, I think that is what's going to happen, but I think the question is like, does the console gamer care? And probably not, because if they did, they'd be
No,
on PC.
maybe not. PC gamers, I think, definitely do care about
Yeah,
that.
and
But
like
console
rightfully
gamers,
so.
maybe not.
But I think that's the question of like, does that do those technological realities mixed with market
Mm.
reality
I
extend the
think I
life
think
cycle of this console generation, and therefore, like,
I don't think so. I think PlayStation misread the market reality, and I think there will be hunger for a new console in 3 years' time. I don't think there was hunger for a new console 4 years into the life cycle, a mid-gen refresh. Xbox wrote it off. I think PlayStation should have wrote it off. PSVR 2 was a disaster. They should have cancelled that.
yeah,
There was a lot of stuff that they misread the market for,
definitely.
and I think they've done obviously a lot right. They've sold 75 million units. The digital edition seems to be a big success for them, but there was a lot that they could have done better. I think that PS5 Pro had no real launch title and no real reason for you to pick it up. Wasn't like the Spider-Man release against the PS4 Pro,
Right.
and that was a huge reason why people picked one up.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think you're right. I do think it's interesting that we're like having this conversation about like devices showing their age and everything when it's like the Steam Deck's only 3 years old, and it does feel like it's showing age already a little bit. And I do think that like that's something that I hadn't really considered when we talk about like the
Mm.
handheld PC market, is like, is that a problem? Because it is a little bit interesting, right? That like a device that like costs, what, twice as much as Nintendo Switch, and you're saying it feels dated.
Not quite. Like, it's 350. The OLED model's similar price in the UK. It's like 299, I
Yeah.
think. So it's like 50 quid more for the base model in the UK of
Okay.
the Steam Deck. So it's like, for that, especially we're considering the OLED came out around the same
Yeah.
time. It's like, makes sense. I think that it was going to happen, but there is still life in it. I don't think
Yeah,
that it's
that's
like
not.
the
I'm not
Steam Deck
making
dead.
that point, but I do think it's interesting that 3 years in, you're like, ooh, starting to show its age, and it's like,
I kind of didn't expect an OLED model, and I kind of figured that 3 years in was when we were going to get a refresh, Steam Deck 2. It feels like to me 3 to 4 years for like a PC is around the life cycle I would expect. Like, things move faster in the PC space than they do in consoles, and that's to kind of be expected. You
yeah.
know,
I guess the question is like, does that is that something that ends up turning people off?
Maybe, but like, look at what happened with the 20 series chips to the 50 series chips, you know, and on the Nvidia side, in like 3 generations, that thing's gone like insane. You know, we went all the way up to like it taking up almost 4 slots, back down to it being tiny, and it's like doing the same performance for cheaper. You know, like it kind of does. We kind of do get those gains, and I think we're only going to see a new Steam Deck when there's a generational leap. I think they've made that clear, and I kind of feel like that could be this year or next year. I'm hoping it's next year. I kind of feel like it's around that time. 5 years makes sense.
Yeah, I think 5 years is a standard console life cycle, right? Like or it used to be. And so we've increasingly moved towards like 8 plus, but yeah.
I mean, but Steam OS also means that you can shop around soon. You know, like we're seeing the Lenovo Legion Go S finally coming out. Like it could be that you go, well, you know what? I want a little bit more power, but I love Steam OS, and now I've got the option to go buy that Ally and install Steam OS.
Right, and get that little bit of extra performance that pushes you over to hitting the benchmarks we're talking about and being able to play some of these games that you've been, priced out of. So Wakahula also said Gran Turismo, I guess, since I don't have a PS5. Oh, and a Gears of War collection. Why is this not a thing already?
Yeah, the Gears of War collection is a strange one, and Max was saying that one as well. Gran Turismo was on the Nvidia leak.
Right.
I'm surprised it's still not out, but then so was Bloodborne, and that's still not here either. So who knows what they've got going on? I also kind of feel like Forza has eaten a lot of Gran Turismo's lunch, and Forza's coming to PlayStation 5. It kind of feels like, to me, that's the game you should probably be playing rather than Gran Turismo. At least I've always enjoyed Forza more. Being a car guy, that's the one I want to
but that's play. That's a taste thing, right? Like it's like
it is a taste thing. It is a taste thing, but they're so similar. But I am surprised that Gran Turismo has not come to PC. It would be right at home there. Give it 21:9 support. Give it, steering wheel support. Allow people to mod it. There's a lot you could do on PC with a car game that you can't do on console.
Yeah, absolutely. So Team Linux also seconded GT, but only if it doesn't require always online play. I wanted to just throw a couple of our own out there. Did you have any that you wanted to add to the pile before we call it a day?
I really would love the Uncharted collection to come. I've started playing a Lost Legacy on there, and I was like, oh, you know what? I want the rest of them.
I've been wanting to replay that series for the last couple of years. I've been thinking the same thing.
Yeah, they are great. Other than that, there's not really any like big AAA ports that I would want from the PlayStation side. Max is right. Nothing's coming from Nintendo.
Right.
So we can count that out.
The thing that I was thinking about in the kind of like week, we had off on this topic to think about it is like, Max called out the Blue Point, remakes. There was like a whole set of like HD trilogy collections on PS3 that I think are all games that I would love to see get the modern, like, remaster treatment. And some of which I've never played, just because I was like a late adopter on the PlayStation 3. But like the Infamous collection, right, is like those games I think are, like Infamous 1, Infamous 2, and then Festival of Blood is I think the like DLC 0.5 game that they put out.
And Killzone, obviously.
Yeah, Killzone 1, 2, and 3, right, of course. Jokes aside, they're,
I'd love to see some of the games stuck on the Vita escape, tear away.
Sure.
The Golden Abyss, the Uncharted game that's on there, like give those some more life. Bring those,
especially Golden Abyss.
Else.
Jesus, can we throw Sony Bend a goddamn bone?
Yeah.
Ratchet and Clank collection, right? There was the Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, Up Your Arsenal, right? Like all those games have not ever had another, another release format, and obviously, Ratchet and Clank is still relevant, so it would be cool to like have access to those older games. There's the Resistance trilogy. That's what's the studio? Oh my God,
There's one of those on Vita that I played as well.
Yeah. Oh my god, I can't. It's oh my god, this is so embarrassing that I can't think of the name of the studio right now. It's
I'm looking at it.
Insomniac. Thank
It
you.
is Insomniac.
Yeah, it's like obviously it was one of the big PlayStation studios, but I'm like, their name is just right on the tip of my tongue.
But also Bend did Retribution.
That's the Vito one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The poor Bend.
Yeah.
And then of course there's like the Jack and Daxter trilogy, right? That they had a port for PS3 and Vita. There's the Best of the PlayStation Network that they did that had Tokyo Jungle, Fat Princess, Sound Shapes, and When Vikings Attack. I think those are all the like games I would love to see get second life, because there was a lot of really cool downloadable games on PS3 that like are just like kind of lost. They're trapped on the PlayStation Network of old. And yeah, like those are all games I would love to see get another at bat on PC.
Of the new stuff, I'd love to see the Astro games move over to PC. Even the VR one, the original.
Sure.
You know, that is
Playroom?
soon going to be unplayable because it's you're not going to be able to get the adapter for the PSVR anymore. You won't be able to play that on the PS5. Bring that over, allow people to play it with their Quest or their Decade or whatever. Playroom is great. I think you could easily sell that. You know, it was a free game when you bought a PS5. You could easily flog that on PC. The only problem with those games is they very much, some of it requires the DualSense. So
Yeah.
it does depend on that. But yeah, most of the games I'd want aren't necessarily ports, they're remakes or remasters. I still want that Oblivion remaster or remake. I still want like a remaster of the Fallout series. Like
I would
Fallout
love for
3
them to
New
do that for
Vegas.
New Vegas. That
Yeah.
would be really nice to get a remake of that, for sure. The one that came up in conversation last week was the Rare Replay. That's another one that I think
Yeah,
would
Rare
be,
Replay's great.
like,
I'm
where's
surprised
that?
that's not on
Where
PC.
is that?
That's weird.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I wonder if they don't have the license for that. Like, 'cause
how could they not? They own Rare.
Yeah, but it's a weird thing, wasn't it? It was like some of those that like took out the Nintendo logo and they were like, yeah, but I guess you own the games, don't you?
Yeah.
Even if you couldn't release all of the games, like say GoldenEye is not possible to port,
Sure.
you know, because of the weird stuff that's going on. You know, you could probably do a deal with Amazon. I'm sure they'd let you, but
Even
bring
if
the
not,
others over.
dude, yeah, like it's all the other ones, you know?
Yeah, I want to play Grabbed by the Ghoulies again. That's a great game.
I mean, I'd be, you know me, I'm all in on that Viva Pinata life. That's what I'm hoping for. And you know, we got that request last week. We got an update yet, Steve? I'm asking you every week on this show until I can play Viva Pinata.
You know what? We haven't got an update because opening the curtains, we're recording this 4 days earlier than we usually do. I haven't had a chance to check that out yet.
What? That's impossible. What do you mean? This was recorded in the future? In the past? I don't know.
Oh god. For me, a lot of the games that I'd want are probably like stuff I'd need to write to GOG about. You know, like they did the work with Night Dive and got Blade Runner ported and gave that a new lease of life. There was an X-Files FMV game from the kind of late 90s, early 2000s that I'd love to see get rejuvenated. You don't play Mulder or Scully, you play another kind of officer in that you know, organization, and you're kind of working on the X-Files. It's really cool. Toy Story 2, give me a port of that. Bring over all of the like Traveler's Tales games and bring
Shout
them
out
over.
to Traveler's Tales, man.
Yeah, and like Disney Skate Adventure. I love like old licensed games like the Monsters Inc. game that came to
I
PS2.
loved that Monsters Inc. game. That was so much fun.
Yeah, it was great.
PlayStation, yeah.
There's so many of those I'd love to see
good
just
time.
like put over.
You know, it's another game that I found in my research while I was looking just like what are like notable games that have never come to PC is Fable 2 is not on
really?
PC. Isn't that crazy?
That'll be a perfect opportunity ahead of Fable to bring that, you know. But
Yeah.
like, I mean, we're seeing this like resurgence of old games, like The Sims recently got the PC re-release. so you can finally play it again.
Oh my God, that actually reminds me of like while we're on. So okay, Sims plus Fable 2 reminded me of another game that I would love to be able to play on a modern device, which is Black and White. Yeah, are you kidding me? Yeah, that game's great, or it was. I don't know if it holds up, but I loved that game.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see that. I mean, I love those kind of games. I mean, that has lineage in all the way back to the Bullfrog era and the games like Theme Hospital and Theme Park. I'd love to see those kind of get another good PC port or a remake. You know, EA still owns those. Do something with it.
Right. Yeah. Give us something fresh. Man. Shout out to Traveler's Tale. That really, you just...
They became TT Games, and who make all the Lego games. So they still exist. They're still around.
Oh, cool. I didn't realize that was them. That they had made that jump.
Don't know why they dropped Traveler's Tales for TT Games, but they did.
It's a cooler name. Traveler's
TT
Tales
Games.
is way
Traveler's
cooler.
Tales, yeah.
It's way cooler. What are you doing? You know, whatever. Fair enough. Good for them.
Yeah.
Still out here making stuff. Any other games that you thought of that need to make the jump?
I don't think so. They're like slowly porting over a lot of games, like the Tomb Raider collection. We're getting another one of those that they're re-releasing on PC. So it's like most of the games in my childhood are there. You know, like and the games of today that I would want to play, most of them are there. I would say like it's really just the odd PlayStation game that I would expect. If Nintendo ever decides to bring them over, that'd be fantastic news, but I don't think they will.
No, I don't think so. Not unless the console market is well and truly dead.
Yeah, which it's not going to happen for them. You know, they're still selling millions of handhelds.
Yeah, they're doing pretty good. So, thank you all so much for joining us on another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast, with a very special thank you to our Patreon producers for the month of February. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Project Julian, Susan Still Likes Cats and Also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, That One Dude Nick, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Can we talk about how cool it is that we got Voodoo Dick, That One Dude Nick, and it rhymes?
That is great.
I love the rhythm that adds there. Shout out to you, Nico.
if everyone fancies like, you know, going in and changing a name and seeing if we can make it, you know, to the tune of We Didn't Start the Fire.
Arnold Rimmer, Chris Valenz. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to let us know what you thought about this week's show, you can let us know in the comments down below, or visit us over at flipscreen.games to drop us a line. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to give this episode a like, share it with a friend, and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you're one of our audio listeners, please take a second to leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps the show get circulated. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.